Today's episode is with Paul Beaudin. Y'all have heard me talk about Paul a lot. He's been behind the scenes. You might see him enter the room to adjust the camera or something now and again. But Paul's the producer here for our show and for many shows at Soundshed Studios. Paul has become a friend through just the work that we've done here on this podcast operation. Something I really appreciate about Paul that you'll see in this conversation is that he's not afraid to disagree. There's a lot of things that we disagree on. There's a lot of things we do agree on that sort of serve as the foundation for our relationship with each other. But I thought it might be fun to bring Paul into the room just to put a face to the name, just to give a little bit of perspective on who he is and where he comes from. So I hope you'll enjoy this conversation. I sure did. I will have more in the future with Paul, but enjoy this broad discussion and borderline vehement disagreement with Paul Beaudin. We did it.
This is super weird.
See, it's going to be hard for you to stay in it because you're constantly thinking about what is the edit going to look like? How am I going to piece this together?
Oh, totally.
Which direction is the camera going to be facing?
Am I in focus at all right now?
I don't know. You are to me. Look, like I'll tell you the same thing I told everybody else that's been in here. If this is all garbage or you just look at it and you're like, no, I can't tolerate that being on the internet. I'm fine with it.
Okay.
To me, it's reps.
Yeah.
And I like talking to you, so.
Can you turn your mic
Qualifies.
a little bit?
Do what with it?
Can you just twist it this part
Towards
with
me?
your face a little bit more? Yep, right there. And then tilt it back.
Tilt it back up.
Yep, that's like that.
Paul.
See, I've already done it. I'm already nitpicking.
You've already nitpicked.
I'm already nitpicking.
Is this your first time to do this? Like on this side of the fence?
On a camera, yeah.
How do you, when you're talking to somebody about what you do for a living, how do you explain it to them? Is there a short version?
Well, yeah. I work for a company that builds podcast studios, and then on the other end, we also have our own studio where we produce people's content and, produce short form and long form content and things like that.
Mm.
But when I got the job, I worked in the bar industry for 20 years, and it was bad for me. It was bad for my mental health, bad for my physical health, and I didn't really. It's the kind of thing you don't realize until you're in it, like for a long period of time, when you kind of look back and go, Jesus, like I was kind of a shithead for a while.
Yeah.
And I'm using that term very lightly. I was a real shithead. And so you get out of it, and I needed something to do, so I was doing like a ride share and stuff like that, and just something to pay the bills. And then I put something on the internet on Facebook because I was struggling for money.
Mm.
And I was like, I really don't want to get back in the bar game, but I know there's money in it. And Matt, who I went to high school with, Matt owns Soundshed Studios, where we're shooting, by the way. I went to high school with him, and he messaged me, and he was like, "Hey, I might have a job for you if you're interested, and just give me a call." So I called him, and we talked for like 45 minutes, where he explains everything we do. And after 45 minutes, I'm like, I still have no idea what you do for a living.
Yeah.
And so really, it was just like he's just come in, feel it out. If it seems like something that could be a good fit, we can go from there. And that's essentially what happened. Like it was a year and a half ago, and I have a background in music, and I was been in a bunch of bands, recorded a bunch of albums, and toured all over the country. And so it kind of fit the audio part of it and some of the video part of it. Like we, two of the guys in my old band, or people in my old band rather, both have photography backgrounds. So it's like I've been influenced in this kind of world for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So it did just kind of work.
It was an easy transition.
Yeah.
What was it about the bar industry that was bad for you?
It's toxic. It's such a toxic environment.
Just purpose built to be toxic? Or is it just the people that are attracted to that as a way to make a living? What is it that makes it toxic?
Well, I mean, it starts with the from management. It starts from ownership. And the owner of a bar has, there's various types of bar owner. There's going to be like your bar owner who is from the bar industry, who's from that bar world, and they party all the time. Or there's the bar owner who has no concept of the bar industry and is so far removed from the business that they own that them being involved is detrimental to the business.
Mm.
And then obviously tons of areas in between. And I've worked for every one of them.
Mm.
And then it, trickles down to like your, management of those bars. They tend to be very burned out. They tend to be super reliant on substances.
Mm.
Um, a lot of them are heavy, heavy, heavy drinkers. And then that trickles down to, your bar staff who are supposed to be this bubbly face of your business. They're supposed to be like they're your face. They're the face of the business. They're who represents you. And there is an encouragement to party, an encouragement to drink, an encouragement to be, engaging and fun. And, I whenever I talk about it, I always quote the band, The Postal Service.
Hmm.
And it's like, it can't be a party if it happens every night. It just can't.
Yeah.
And for you, for the patron, the customer, this is a great party. For me, it's Tuesday.
Right.
And it's like, I do this 5-6 times a week. And over a short, over that period of time, it becomes really detrimental to your physical health and your mental health, because you're always expected to be this, the beacon of partying.
Mm-hmm.
We're also held to this ridiculous standard of being like these drinking party superheroes, where it's like, to the point where we like shun people who can't drink as much as us. It's like, do you hear this?
Point of pride.
Like, right. It's like I'm better than you because I can outdrink you.
Yeah,
it's like, ew.
Yeah.
No.
Is there a sustainable version of that? Like, is there an adult version of being a bar staffer that
actually
is
yes.
healthy?
Mm-hmm.
You've run into one before?
I've known a handful.
Yeah.
The common denominator with lifers, they don't drink at work. They leave work at work and they leave home at home.
Yeah.
Those two things cannot last for a long period of time.
Is there a part of it you miss?
The camaraderie, the social aspect of it.
A little more of a team dynamic.
Yeah, like the being in the shit, oh, that's another part of it. Like, I miss the chaos, which is funny that I wore this shirt because it says comfort in chaos. I thrived in it. I really did thrive in it. Like, I was, you'd go into work on a Friday at 9:00 and it's just a shit show.
Yeah.
It's just balls to the wall, elbow to asshole, just the worst and the best all in one building. It's like, let's see where this goes.
Yeah.
It's just wild.
Yeah.
And then it's just turn and burn, and there's various styles of bartending. I was always in like a turn and burn high speed environment where it's just chaos. And, you're taking 4, 5, 6 drink orders at a time. Boom, 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 boom. What do you want? What do you want? What do you want? And then the occasional throwing someone out, the occasional fist fight, the occasional breaking up a fight, it's just like, so, and that's the kind of thing. I think that was one of the moments when I realized how toxic it really was. I was working at one of the last bars I worked at, and there was like this, it was this crazy situation where this guy and this girl who used to date are on a double date with their new partners. One of which, the woman is with another woman. So it's a lesbian or like a bisexual or lesbian kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a guy and a girl, the male partner. So there's some sort of altercation. And I look over and I see this woman from the relationship just doing like a superhero, like come down on his face. And I'm just like, Jesus
against the guy?
Christ, on the guy's face. And I just have to run over there and I tackle them both. I'm prying her off him and the punches are swinging. I'm getting knocked. And I'm just sitting there going, this is what my life has boiled down to. Like, I didn't sign up to do this.
Yeah, there's a little less of that in the podcast studio.
Yeah. So it's just
slightly less.
And so it's toxic from a position from the customer for the bartender. It can be toxic between the employees.
Yeah.
A lot of people dip in their pen and company ink, if you catch my drift. Also, a lot of people, just, you know what like a single serving friend is?
Transactional friendships.
Yeah. That's very much what this is like. It's like, some people make real long lasting relationships in bars, but from what I've experienced, all the friendships you have in that bar go away once you leave.
Yeah. My sister worked bar and restaurant for a long time, and that's kind of her story too. And I don't know that I know anybody that's worked in bar and restaurant that has had like a sustainable long-term version of it. It's always this thing that you did when you were younger that you're like, for most of those people, it's the job that you had when you were younger that gives you a touch point in your history where you're like, at least I'm not doing that anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
For me, it was cleaning pools.
Okay.
Like clean pools.
You were a pool boy?
Yeah, dude.
Okay.
I was a pool boy from my senior year of high school, summer, several summers in college. And it's just that job that like you show up to a pool, it's completely full of leaves. You spend an hour cleaning it out, and then you go back 4 days later and it's completely full of leaves again. And there's just like this repetitive, I can see now in hindsight the appeal of that job over the long term because it's kind of mindless and,
security.
Dirty pool when you get there and clean pool when you leave. It's sort of easy to go from start to finish.
Right. There's always going to be dirty pools.
But it's nice to have that job in your history that you're like, man, today was tough, but at least I'm not cleaning pools today.
Tell me about the stereotype.
What's that? The pool boy stereotype?
Did it exist? Is it real?
It probably exists. I kind of kept to myself, and I never, I guess towards the end of me doing it, I did it by myself, but I was always with some guy that had been doing it for a long time, and he knew the owner, and, it never got that weird. There were times where it got a little like borderline, I probably should get out of here. This person's a predator. Right. Yeah. Man, there's a lot of left turns I want to take here, but here's a tough one. Okay. This sort of harkens back to the story I was told yesterday. Does evil exist? Have you ever been confronted with evil?
So I knew you were going to drop some of this shit.
Dude, I want to go heavy. I want to go heavy right in just to make you forget about the cameras.
Does evil exist?
Have you ever been confronted with evil where you see it and you're like, oh man, that isn't good. That came from a different place. Let me tell you a story I heard yesterday.
Okay.
And then you can be thinking about your version of it.
Sure.
So this guy he's in executive protection. He was in witness protection before, and he tells a story about a girl that he was assigned to protect who was 19. She was recruited by some billionaire guy when she was 13, and his style was he liked 13 to 16-year-olds. And he would purposefully build a harem of 13, 14, 15-year-old girls, impregnate them. Once they were all pregnant, within 2 or 3 months of each other, he'd get the pregnancy to the end of the first trimester to, 3 months in or so. He would put them on his private plane and he would fly them to China, where he would harvest the fetus out of that mother to extract stem cells from it that he would then take to his private island, wherever it was, and have them in a freezer so that when he got sick, he would have stem cells that came from his biology that he could inject into himself so he would get better faster.
Wow.
That messes with me, that there is a version of humanity that is acceptable for. I don't know how to call that by anything other than the word evil.
Do I think that's monstrous? Yeah. I think the term evil.
Yeah, maybe define the term first.
It's a spectrum, isn't it?
Sure.
Evilness is a spectrum, right? It's not like you can put people into the evil category and then that's where you stay. I think it all depends on circumstance. I think it's all based on, what's evil in certain time frames and certain timelines is not evil in others. Like, maybe 200 years ago, if you saw some of the things that exist today in commonplace, you might not look at that as an evil quality or an evil trait. I think it really just depends on the environment in which the thing is happening. All right, you're the leader of a tribe, and your tribe goes to the tribe next to yours and slaughters the whole tribe and takes all their resources. And to us right now, if I said that to that scenario to you right now, you'd go like, that's an awful thing. There's probably some evilness there. But if you were living during that time, it's like, well, you just got to that tribe before they got to you.
Yeah, it might be a little different.
Is that evil? Or is that the status quo?
Mm.
And I think what a lot of it boils down to is that people I don't think there is anyone born with that sort of monstrous nature. I think that those monstrous natures are cultivated
Hmm.
through, you know, through positive or negative experience. I mean, we are a we are a collaboration. We are the embodiment of everything we've ever experienced.
Yeah, you're part nature and part nurture.
Right. Like you are who you are because of every positive and negative event that has ever
Yeah.
happened to you.
And some of it's nature, some of it's built into.
I think maybe to an extent, there's probably a part of it, but I think a vast majority of it comes from your environment.
Mm.
And you know, one thing I think, no, don't quote me on this, but I think that there is a commonality amongst child abusers is being abused themselves. And it's like, are they a monster because they were abused and now follow that tendency?
Mm.
I don't think that makes them necessarily evil, but I think it created the monster that didn't need to be created in the first place, and the cycle is perpetuated because of monstrous acts.
Mm.
So to say that that guy is evil by our standards, perhaps, um, for all we know, 500 years from now, that'll be commonplace,
Mm.
which I don't think is necessarily that's not it's neither here or right nor wrong in the concept of 500 years from now, because whatever happens, I'll be dead anyway. But I think it really does depend on the circumstance in which you're applying the term.
Yeah. Have you ever been confronted with something that you would define as evil? Does anything come to mind that matches your definition? Because fundamentally, I think I agree with you that like labeling somebody as an evil person is kind of an easy button. It's like a way of dismissing things that they do and not having to reckon with the fact that the Viktor Frankl quote of like the line between good and evil cuts through the heart of every man.
Right, it dehumanizes.
It dehumanizes, and it also lets yourself off the hook.
Right.
I have a capacity to make evil decisions too.
Sure. And I think everyone does.
But it's that confrontation with the side of a person that crosses that threshold into evil or whatever you would define it.
Yeah.
That's the thing that's destabilizing to me. Like hearing stories like that, it
makes my
gets
stomach
to my
turn.
foundation.
Yeah. But that's one thing that, like, as soon as I had a daughter, I have a 7-year-old. And as soon as I had a kid, one of the things that I noticed that changed was, like, I never used to have a problem watching things that happen to kids in movies. Never used to bother me, ever. I was whatever. I don't have kids. What do I care? And then once I had a kid, every, like, ugly thing that would happen to a little kid would make me sick to my stomach.
Yeah.
Like, I'd very, very noticeably, it's like I feel like I'm gonna vomit. And I don't know.
Describe yourself prior to having kids.
Selfish. Very selfish. But not in like, I wasn't selfish in like a everything's about me way. It was more of a selfish and I just kind of did whatever I wanted to.
Yeah.
I had no limits. I had no constraints.
How old were you when you had your daughter?
30.
30.
And I had no reason to not do anything, and then you have a kid and all of a sudden you're kind of confronted with all of your failings. And it's like, I should probably fix those before they get old enough to notice.
How quick was it for you before you realized, like, oh man, stuff's got to change here? Now I'm responsible for a little critter.
34.
4 years in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. I had this moment, which I've told this story. I may have told you this story before, where I was at my old apartment, and I had told my daughter to clean her room. Like, at this point, we're probably at 25 times. Just pick up some of the stuff on her floor and whatever. Not really clean a room she's for, but like pick some stuff up, put some stuff in places that are more, like a container of some sort. And And I was on the phone, and I come in from the patio, and I was like, clean your room, because she just walked out of her door, and she closes it behind her and goes, no. And I went, come again? And she said, no. I'll call you back. And I got real low down to her level. I was like, one more time. I didn't hear you. I just want to make sure I heard what you said. She said, no. And I said, here's the deal. Clean your room, or I'm doing it with a trash bag. And she rolled her eyes and said, fine, and went in her room and cleaned her room. 4 years old. Way too much attitude for a 4-year-old, first of all. I mean, tree, apple, whatever. So I said that, and those words came out of my mouth, and I was like, it was like battery acid in my mouth. It was just like, I just gave a direct quote from my father to my daughter.
You heard your dad and yourself.
And it made me very unhappy.
Yeah.
And that was like the moment when I realized, it was like, you need to get your shit together.
Yeah.
Like, you need to really start making this a priority. And like the way you communicate, the way, like, you need to be throwing all the wrenches in all of the works to figure out how to make this, to stop perpetuating cycles. Speaking of perpetuating cycles.
Are there things you do now that fall in that same category as a parent?
That I do now?
Well, like I asked the question about when you had the turning point for yourself, like after your daughter was born.
Right.
Because some people have this story of like, oh, I was in the delivery room, and as soon as my kid came out, it was like instantly I knew, okay, I've got to change, or something's got to give. It wasn't like that for me either.
No.
Like it's not lost on me in the moment, the significance of having a baby.
Sure.
And I remember the things, the little subtleties of like, okay, this is a live human that I'm now responsible for.
Right.
But I don't think I was really forced to like reckon with my own immaturity. Mm-hmm. We've talked about this a bunch, but just the things that weren't serving me well, that were childish. And I don't think I really started to grasp a hold of those things and try to weed them out until my boys were like, till my oldest was probably 4 or 5.
Yeah.
Same thing. It's when they start to really come online and you start to see them emulate you. That was the thing for me that was like the turning point.
Right.
It's like now I don't have any excuse to keep doing these things because they're going to start to emulate them themselves.
Right.
And
good and bad.
Yeah. Good and bad.
Right.
Yeah, that's exactly right. It doesn't stop for me. Like, man, my oldest, we had a baseball game yesterday. I'm coaching his baseball team. And we had a game yesterday where he just kept goofing off in the dugout, and we're getting thumped. We're losing by a lot. And my response to him in the moment was like annoyance. He's goofing off in the dugout. I keep telling him to stop doing it. Mm-hmm. I get to a point where I'm this close to just removing him from the dugout. And we got home. I didn't talk to him the whole way home. He knew I was pissed at him.
Right.
We got home, and I go into his room to tell him goodnight, and I just told him, if what happened at tonight's game happens again, I will remove you from the team. I'll kick you off the team completely. I won't remove you from the dugout. I will walk you out. I'll take your jersey off of you, and you won't be a part of the team anymore. And I have sat with it since, because I still haven't talked to him about it. And I realized, man, I took a thing that was a 3 and I turned it into a 10.
I am very good at that.
Which I have is probably something I inherited from my parents,
Very well.
That, man, I'm realizing all these things that I still have to outgrow.
Yeah. I mean, that I learned from a very young age that the way to handle your problems is through anger and screaming.
Mm-hmm.
That was how I learned. Like,
what's your lineage? What's your family makeup? Where's your family hail from?
My primarily France.
France.
My mother.
French are a docile people, though. Are they not?
Are you not familiar with the French Revolution?
I guess in the long arc of history, yeah.
We were decapitating politicians.
Yeah, good point. Fair
on top
point.
of Napoleon almost took over the entire planet.
Yeah, so, fair point.
Cursed
history is hard.
But no, my dad, his mother, her last name is Hebert. We called her, we called it Hebert, but Hebert is the last name. And we actually have, you can find Jacques Rene and Louis Philippe Bear in encyclopedias. They were, speaking of the French Revolution, I have a ancestor who led an anti-Christian movement during that time and an anti-government movement. They tried to assassinate Maximilien Robespierre, was caught the day before, and him and 17 other people got guillotined.
Anti-Christian and anti-government. The apple in the tree again.
What can I say?
Yeah.
But no, that's like, and my mom's more of a mutt, just kind of all over Europe.
Yeah.
I'm not actually sure like all the specifics. I think the English, I think maybe German in there. Honestly, I don't really know.
But the hot temper.
That wasn't nationality. That was, speaking of throwing a wrench in the works.
Yeah.
Shit will continue if you don't stop it. And it's just, that was just how I learned how to face problems, is by screaming at them till they stop. And whoever's loudest is right. And then, it's just like, that's just not how you handle problems. And then also, on top of which, some, depression through the years, and just like things compounding and realizing that, like, do I want to be my daughter's friend or her enemy? And it's like, if I keep doing the things that I'm doing, I'm going to become her enemy. And I don't want that. I want to be her dad first and her friend. I don't want to be her dad and then her enemy. And it's just, it took a lot. Like I go to therapy, like I've spent a lot of time talking about these things. Just, I'm probably the most emotionally intelligent I've ever been. I don't face every problem with screaming. I'm a much more calm person, which is really nice. But it did not come at, it came at a cost. It was just like,
wasn't necessarily modeled for you.
Not at all.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It's, my sort of history with that, parental history with that, stems more from my mom than it does from my dad.
Yeah.
But I've had to come to grips with, like, I've had to put myself in her shoes, in what she was going through at the time, and realize, okay, at that age, she had this happen to her. And then at this age, she had this happen to her, and coming to the point of empathy and even understanding, not excusing.
Right.
That's
crucial.
Not making it okay. Like, cause it did spill the banks onto us.
Sure.
And it wasn't just exclusive to her. Like, my dad had his own stuff. But yeah, that coming to the point of empathy to realize, okay, she was a little girl herself when these things were happening to her.
Sure.
You understand, at the very least, how those cycles perpetuate.
100%. And I totally, like, I'm not naive to that. Like, I get that I'm not the first person to grow up in an environment that might not have been conducive to my adulthood.
Yeah.
But it's like, but that doesn't change the fact that I went through those experiences and was able to try and work towards coming out of them.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't blame anybody for having poor environments. I do hold them accountable for the way they act afterwards.
Yeah.
Like,
it's a fine line to walk.
Like, you are only, like, you're not responsible for the things that happen to you, but you are responsible for how you handle it.
Yeah, I agree.
And
that's a hard concept for our culture to get its head around in general.
Yeah.
Play the hand you're dealt.
Sure.
You can't use the crutch of whatever, systemic oppression. It only goes so far, because at some point you still got to do something to better your position.
Sure. And I don't even mean that from like a pull yourself up by your bootstraps kind of thing.
That's a different.
I don't mean that. I mean like understand your trauma, recognize your trauma, illustrate your trauma to yourself the way you need to, but learn from it. Like, try to learn from it. Because, like, as I do think that embracing that and like allowing, because again, we said, like, you are a summation of everything that you have experienced. And were I not to have experienced some of the hardships I experienced growing up, I wouldn't be who I am today. So I can't appreciate who I am for what I've had to go through. Do I look at those times fondly? Fuck no. Do I wish they hadn't happened? Absolutely. Did they? Yes. Can I change it? No. So what can I change?
Yeah.
What can I affect from this? Who can I become as a result?
There's also a future version of yourself that can be successful despite those things, or even as a result of those things, that, like, you're dealt this hand.
Right.
And you can either go this direction and use those things as a reason why you ended up in this gutter. And it's a very well-worn path. And it's a very easy story to articulate. I had this shit happen to me when I was a kid. these things happened. Here was my response to it, and it was just inevitable. I was going to end up in that gutter.
That fueled me to go here. Yeah.
But at the very least, it's just a cooler story to be like, yeah, I was dealt this hand. I couldn't help it.
Mm-hmm.
But look where I ended up.
Right.
And that version of your story, it takes an ownership of your circumstance that is hard for most people, I think.
Right.
Because it does require you to be responsible for your results.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And I think that was a crucial difference between our generation and maybe our parents' generation is they weren't expected to handle that.
Yeah.
They were expected to go from here to here.
Right.
And avoid everything that happens in here. But that's the big joke, though, is you can't avoid this part. They just covered it up.
That is kind of a hallmark of our parents' generation.
Right. They just put a Band-Aid over this part.
Right.
They went, I was this sad little boy who needed all these things I didn't get or got lots of things I didn't need.
Mm.
And now I'm this adult who's expected to be a productive member of society without ever having to address anything in the middle.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's not fair. That's not fair. And that's actually one of the really nice things about our generation is we're actually allowed to meet in this spot.
I think you're right. And I think it takes previous generations not necessarily covering that up, but maybe just having enough like physical needs in Maslow's hierarchy where they were just focused on meeting their physical needs and they really couldn't move up, And we have the luxury of inheriting an environment where our physical needs are mostly met.
Right.
And we have the bandwidth to be able to apply to spiritual needs and self-actualization and all the stuff about that. So there's a version of that we can be appreciative of, I guess.
Sure.
What's interesting about our friendship, I won't use the word interesting because that gets overused in podcasts, but you know me pretty well just through having listened in on a lot of conversations in this room.
Right. Well, conversations I didn't even have.
Yeah. But
it's a fly on the wall.
I'm interested to know from you, based on what you know about me through listening in on these conversations, what do we disagree about? What's something you and I don't agree on?
Is this an attempt to poke the bear?
I don't think so. I have enough respect for you, and I think we've had enough honest, real conversations to know we're not the same person.
Right.
But that there's an appreciation there of like what it is that you do. And I feel a sense of mutual respect that, it takes disagreeing with somebody takes having built a little bit of a foundation of trust. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So it's a hallmark of my best friendships or those people are people that I know I've disagreed with and I see how they fight.
Right.
Right.
We don't agree politically. We don't agree religiously. Those are two of the major ones. What else do we know?
Tell me about politically. Let's start there because that one's easier than religiously. What is it we disagree about politically?
I think you know.
What do you assume about me politically?
I think you don't like people meddling in your business. I think you don't like
politicians meddling in my business.
Well, right.
Yeah.
Politicians meddling in your business. I think you don't like feeling unduly taxed. I feel like you don't like being lied to. But that's a commonality, I think, with everybody.
Yeah.
The problem is that no one ever thinks their politician's lying to them.
Yeah. Well, yeah, certainly.
I was actually just having a conversation with my mom, actually, about politics because she's pretty bent out of shape about the state of things right now. She's terrified about losing her Social Security. And I was just like, I grew up, like, I mean, you saw a picture of me when I was 16. I had a 7-inch Liberty spikes with pink, done with Elmer's glue. And like, I've been fighting the fight for the oppressed since I was 16, and I'm so tired, like I'm just exhausted. Like I'm so tired of still having to have conversations about like people's rights and people like whether or not certain people should get rights and other people shouldn't. It's just like, And I know that a lot of times, there's a lot of discourse, not me talking over there away from the mic. There's a lot of discourse with amongst people who don't have to face the harsh realities of the politicians that they elect, where they have conversations like where we used to be able to have these calm conversations. We used to be able to have like discussions about our differences, and it would never be an issue. Like what changed? It was like, well, because your politics have been polarized. You are now your politics represent you. Like your identity is defined by your politics now. Whereas before that wasn't necessarily the case.
Is that the case for you?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah, actually, yeah. I mean, it's not necessarily who I defend; it's who I don't. It's who I'm against. Is really who defines me. What defines me, and that's been the case my whole life. I've always known what I didn't like and not what I did. But that's whatever. But I really feel like people's politics are defining them because they're bigger issues, like in our current political administration, like voting for him has lots of implications. Like it comes with baggage. And that baggage is that whatever he does, I supported, even if that's not the case. Because it's like you pick and you choose which things matter to you when you elected this guy. And that wouldn't make as much difference if it was a George Bush Jr. or if it was a Barack Obama. That mattered less because those people were more likely to make decisions based on the good of like more than just himself. Whereas that doesn't necessarily show itself here, where it's like the different. It's like I supported what he said about, the quote being, I supported what he said about, I think that we shouldn't be taxed as much. But I'm also just going to ignore the fact that we're deporting people who are actual U.S. citizens. And that part doesn't matter to me because that doesn't involve me. It's like, but it all involves you. And when you're picking a political leader, you should be picking someone who collectively follows the same beliefs that you do. And if this person encompasses that, then we have fundamental differences that makes me and you not good. And that's where a lot of the polarizing comes from, I think, is that it's like when you are represented by somebody who does monstrous things, that makes me concerned about your morality.
Yeah, I do think that's how we ended up in such a divided place, seemingly.
Very much so.
And that happens on both sides of the political aisle. Like the PR, I say PR as though it's an organized thing. I don't think it's always an organized thing. But I think the PR machine that exists largely because of our media apparatus, and particularly social media apparatus.
Sure.
The business model represented there thrives on division. It thrives on what pisses you off, and it's going to feed you that thing that pisses you off.
Right.
And that what life would teach you is the person across the table from you, no matter how much you agree with them on, if you agree with them on everything, you've built an echo chamber. And that's just not real. It's just not real.
That's fair.
And my experience has been that when I'm at a table with somebody that I know I have disagreements with, we're starting at a place of mutual understanding that, okay, there's some shit we don't agree on. So let's spend a little time with the things that we do agree on so that we have a foundation for how we can interact with each other.
Right.
And I think culturally we've completely lost the ability to do that.
Right.
Because you will consume, I'm not saying you, I'm saying because a person will consume sometimes or oftentimes, most of the time, they'll consume things without realizing they're consuming them that piss them off. And that if you're fed, if you're A/B tested content and you're fed the A version that pisses you off and you're fed the B version that's the good version of the story, you'll click on the A version. That's just human nature. And that the business model represented there in that media apparatus is it knows what's the thing that I can feed to Tanner that's going to piss him off and keep his eyeballs on the screen more so we can sell more ads. It's like I don't need to understand it deeper than that because that's a business model. I know what makes money in that industry. And so, I like the conversation topic of what are the things that we disagree with, because I really think if we had 4 hours to line them all out, here's all the things that I believe. Here's all the things that you believe. My hunch is that there'd be way more things that we share in common than things that we don't. And
Probably.
that for the things that we don't share in common, that there's very likely a bulk of that category that's a misunderstanding. If you were to say, here's a politician that I would vote for because I'm in lockstep with most of their views, with 100% certainty, there's something I could find in that politician's background, political history, professional history, that you would look at and go, oh God, I don't agree with that at all.
Mm-hmm.
But there's these things over here that just were more important to me. They were an issue that was dearer to my heart, whatever the case is. So, boy, I've got choice A, I've got choice B. I'm not particularly in lockstep with either of them, but I agree with more of what this person's saying than this person. And it's just where I find myself in the last 3 voting cycles is wanting to invest as much energy as it takes for me to cast that vote in a way that represents me in the way that I feel about the world.
Mm-hmm.
Once I've invested that energy and I have a pretty good sense of which direction I would want to go, and I've walked into that polling booth and I've cast that vote, that should cease to get energy and attention from me going forward. Whether it was Biden beating Trump in 2020, whether it's Trump beating Kamala this cycle, or Trump in 2016, like the moment that vote is cast, the energy that I'm investing in that person or that politician should go to zero. Now it doesn't. Like I get wrapped around the axle too, especially if there's stuff going on that pisses me off, right? Because I'll keep clicking on it.
Right.
But there's so much that's within my actual sphere of ability to influence that if I'm giving attention to something that's not within my ability to influence, it's just wasted energy.
Fair. And I find myself probably expending too much energy on stuff that I can't control, especially in terms like that.
Yeah.
But I find it deeply upsetting that like we are not a moral country. And we haven't been for a long time. Like and I don't necessarily mean that like, well, maybe I do. I mean, like so many of the military conflicts we've been in have not been moral conflicts. So much about what we do is about turning people into a means instead of a means to an end. Essentially, it's we're going to go bomb a country so we can get their oil. Or we're going to go tariff the shit out of every country around us, and as a means to benefit ourselves, even though that's not how that's going to play. And it's going to be I feel like going to be a huge problem for everybody. I mean, the global economy is down. What is it? 3 trillion right now in like a week. But we don't make political decisions morally. And I think that's really what people don't realize their power. And they think because of the way our political system has been enshrined as like we make them these deities. Like at the end of the day, you're there because we put you there. And we don't make politicians do what we tell them to. And that's the thing. They're appointed positions.
Yeah.
And
they have a little too much power.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in that, we agree. I think politicians have way too much power. But I'm not saying that they shouldn't have power, in necessary power. What I am saying is we need to stop allowing things like Donald Trump to happen in the first place. Like that should never have happened.
I think that the challenge with that, Paul, and maybe this is an area we would agree if we had 4 hours to go through it. But I think that the challenge with holding him up as this example of a thing that we can't allow to happen is that the majority of the people in the country voted for him. And the moment you draw a morality line between this guy is immoral, therefore the people that voted for him are immoral, you're taking more than half of the country and saying those people are immoral, and that's how you end up with perpetual division that never reconciles.
So my response to that would be, it's not that I think the people who voted for him are immoral. I think that they don't make moral arguments towards the political leaders they choose. Whereas if you're viewing things from a philosophical perspective, if you're looking at like, a Kant or a John Stuart Mill's with utilitarianism, or you're looking at, Hume. If you view your political leader within a boundary of what you consider morality, all of a sudden this thing's not okay, then that's not okay, then that's not okay, then that's not okay. Then all of a sudden you're voting for someone who is an immoral person. So it becomes immoral to vote for him.
Mm.
And that's what I feel like people make decisions based on like, how much money am I going to make when this guy goes in office? It's like, that's not morality. That's turning people into a means to an end. That's you're making an immoral decision by choosing someone who doesn't have your interest in mind. That's not That's not even utilitarianism, because at the end of the day, only one person Donald Trump has in mind, and that's Donald Trump.
Is it? This is going to take a left turn into the second thing that we disagree about.
And I know this is probably going to upset some of your viewers. So I apologize.
I'm not doing this for my viewers, all 11 of them. But by setting up that framework for how you should vote, you are requiring the person that you vote for to be a moral person. And the left turn into religiosity or faith or the concept of God. The argument that let's say a person that believes in God would make is that all have sinned.
Mm-hmm.
And that the moment you try to make a decision based on the morality of that person, and you're confronted with the things that they do that are immoral, and all of the human beings that have ever lived have that immorality somewhere in their history, you're left with this nihilism at the end of it that, well, here's the things that Kamala Harris did that were immoral, or here's the things that Joe Biden did, or anybody on the other end of the political spectrum. The moment it becomes the thing that you're doing for morality's sake, and you're faced with the reality that that person has done a bunch of shit in their history that's immoral that you wouldn't agree with, then you also have to reckon with your own immorality.
Sure, which no one wants to do.
And the wheels come off.
And
then
like
you just get nihilistic.
Morality.
Yeah.
Morality is obviously also a spectrum.
Okay, this may be the thing that we disagree on. Is morality a spectrum? Is there your truth and my truth, or is there truth that's objective?
I think it depends on, your truth is not the same as my truth all the time.
Right. But sometimes is there truth?
It's arguable. I'm
asking you.
What I say is there truth.
Remember Mike Spadier?
Yeah.
This is something that I went back and I listened to our last conversation, and I wish in hindsight I could have that conversation again, because this was the thing that he was saying. I don't remember how we got on it. It may have been the optimism question, but he was saying that there's not ever going to be objective, easy to define, this is true and this is not true, because we live in this era now where you can take one story and tell this version of it, and it's going to completely contradict with this version of it.
Right.
And you're going to consume this version and I'm going to consume this version, and we're just operating on different facts.
We also exist in a world where, when I was younger, I very seriously considered going into journalism. And the concept of bias was always something that was very interesting to me. And the point of a journalist is to report an unbiased opinion on events that occurred. So it's like, person walks in the room, they sat down in a chair, they said hello, they walked out the door. That is me reporting the details that happened of a person who walked into a room, sat down, said hello. But if I say the person sat down in the chair, they had a look that looked,
they glared at the person across the table,
or they smiled. They looked like they were interested in the conversation.
Their peaceful disposition.
I have changed the narrative to an
to.
event that happened. So the truth was that the person sat in the chair, they waved, they walked out the door. But I'm illustrating the picture of what happened differently based on the narrative I want to spin. So it's like the truth, and then there's the modified version of that. Is my truth the same as your truth? Probably not.
I'm saying, is there truth?
Is there truth?
Are there things that, if you took the population of people that exist in, let's just say America, because that's where we are there things that eliminating the wild ends of the bell curve of like the 2% that are left leaning that are just lunatics and the 2% that are right leaning that are just lunatics who, can't agree on anything except for they have a lot in common with each other, ironically. That the 96% of people in the middle would say, yeah, that's true. Does that exist?
The truth to a certain a demographic or society or a culture, I think that has to be agreed on. I think that has to be discussed. So it's like if we have if we have like a group of 100 people, and then 75 of them all say, well, first of all, I think there's provable scientific truths.
Okay. So let's start there.
So that in that way, yes, I think there's 100% truth.
There is objective truth.
There is objective truth
with science
because there's provable, experimentable, theorized
things
concepts
you can reproduce that have existed in nature over and over.
I think in that realm there is truth.
Yeah,
and I think people who try to negate that truth have an agenda. Because the science has no agenda, really. Science's agenda is to further science. And that's one of the things I love about science versus theology and ideologies is that science has no issues with going back on what it said and saying, we were wrong. This is the way we figured it out. And that's one of the great things about science is that it's always evolving. It's always being compounded on and figured out and deconstructed and put back together in a way that makes more sense. It's like there's no right is based on what they can prove.
Yeah.
Versus wrong is based on what they can't prove. Like what is it? What was it? Edison, whatever, like when building the light bulb, figured out like 500 ways how to not build a light bulb before he did it. Like, that's truth.
Yeah.
You figured out a true way to build a light bulb.
That's science done well.
Right. And I think that science is unbiased in that way. Science doesn't need bias in that way. Whereas ideologies do. And that truth isn't truth to me. That's people trying to understand things they can't understand. And specifically with religious or theology kind of mindsets, it's all people trying to come up with the same end game, which is comfort in knowing they're not about their lives. And if you look at the Aztecs, they worship sun gods, or if you look at the Egyptians, they had a sun god. It's like, is there really a sun god? Science would say absolutely not. That's a burning ball of gas called the sun. It's a star. But back then, that was true for them. Science shows that that's not true. Even if it was true for you, that doesn't make it actually factual.
Yeah.
And I think that's the major difference.
The moment you insert humanity into that equation, it becomes a problem because human nature that has this trailer of ego behind it,
right,
when involved in anything, even objective truth like science, you end up with ego-laced, you end up with studies to prove that something is objectively true that inherently have biases built into them in order to get whatever result it is that you're looking for. So like the moment you enter humans into anything that you would say is objective, you're going to end up with that slippery slope because this person doesn't want to have their scientific studies they did before disproven by this new group who has a different theory, and ego enters the picture, and then they start protecting the thing that they did that makes up their entire career, and they defend it as, well, this is the science. I'll give you an example. What is something I would consider to be objective truth when you look at any species of animal ever to have existed is that in order for that species to be furthered, you have male version of that species mating with female version of that species. Yet somehow in the past 20 years, that's become a slippery slope for humanity anyways, for the human species, where
slippery why?
Maybe it's not so objective that there's a male and a female human, that there's...
But you're talking about procreating.
Spectrum.
You're talking about procreation.
I'm talking about something that I would consider to be objectively true, and using science as the example, because I think that is a good example. A thing that can be reproduced.
What about asexual animals? What about animals that change their genders?
For tiny percentage anomalies, those exist anywhere, right? But when you're talking about something that exists across time,
or homosexuality among species, that happened. That's way more rampant than you think it is.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that's not what I'm arguing. What I'm arguing is that the objectivity of that topic would be that in order for a species to further,
right,
you have to have male, you have to have female.
Okay.
And so, the objective version of that became a slippery slope that alienated a whole lot of people on, say, the conservative end of the spectrum, is that the moment you start to question something as fundamental as there is man, there is woman, they get together and create future generations. And now all of a sudden that becomes a debatable thing, or worse, a thing that is a sign of your bigotry, because you're arguing, well, wait a minute. No, I'm just a dude. Like, I've got dude parts and she's got lady parts. The moment that becomes a thing to be divided on, you're going to take something that's foundational for a bunch of people, like the majority of people, and say you are bad because you don't agree with my version of truth. That is, this is more of a spectrum thing and more debatable.
Except for the debate is not whether or not men or women exist. The debate is whether there's more than that.
Yeah, but I think that's causing a lot
where
of that becomes a problem, though, Paul, and this sort of dips its toe again in the religious bucket. Where it becomes problematic is when the population that disagrees with that notion takes it so far as to alter what happens with a kid. That becomes problematic for me, for reasons we talked about earlier, like the thin line between something that's not great and something that's evil. The moment you touch on kids,
right?
Boy,
I would definitely argue that no parents are taking their kids and forcing them to have sex changes. That's just not happening. But there are kids that advocate for that, and their parents bend to it. That has happened before.
There are kids that advocate for getting tattoos. There are kids that advocate for wanting to not go to school.
I mean,
like, doing something as impactful as injecting sex hormones into a 6-year-old.
Like, no one's doing that. They won't do that because he can't do it at that age. It happens.
It happens.
No, it happens at puberty. That's when they start doing it.
I think it's pretty well documented that it happens before then, frequently. It's okay. I'm not. What we're not going to do in an hour-long conversation is get to the bottom of that nuance. What I'm saying is that when it gets to the point of these extremes, where people get so married to their version of truth that they're willing to die on the hill and affect kids on either side of that aisle, whether it's a way a conservative looks at the world or way that a more left-leaning person looks at the world. If you get so married to it that you can't pause and zoom out enough to go, is this in and of itself the right thing to pursue? Or am I sure that this is the case? That's where you lose the majority of people, I think. Because I think that the majority of people would look at an issue like that and agree on some fundamental core tenets.
I don't think the threat to children is nearly as bad as you are illustrating.
Well, but I don't think the threat to deporting an American is as bad as you would think it would be.
I feel like it's significantly higher.
It could be.
But one thing I do think is that, like, one of the arguments that was being made about trans women using women's bathrooms was that there's going to be some sort of uptick in assaults on women, which really just means if you think that a trans woman is a man in women's clothing, then what you're really saying is you're afraid of men. And if a man wanted to go into a women's bathroom and assault someone, they would. And a trans woman who spends $100,000 getting surgeries to make themselves feel good in their bodies isn't really the threat here. And I think that's something that gets overlooked quite a bit. It's like, trans women, like, what makes you think a trans woman wants to, like, go through all these elaborate surgeries that are extremely expensive and invasive if they weren't confident then this is who they are.
Well, I mean, a trans woman's a pretty broad category.
Sure.
And there's a lot of people nested within that category that are different from each other.
Sure.
Some of them are freaking lunatics. Like any way you slice and dice the population of people, right? Let's just use you or use me as an example. You can define me in all these ways, right? I'm a male, pretty broad category. I am Caucasian, pretty broad category. And then you start getting more and more narrow. I'm American. I'm a business owner. I live in Bastrop County, Texas. Like you start to winnow it down to even the smallest subcategory. Let's say there's a subcategory of 100 people. I'm one of 100 people that have this characteristic in the whole world. And you take all 100 of those people and you put them in a room. Whatever that category is, what are the chances that one of those 100 people is a freaking lunatic? And any random assortment of 100 people in a room.
Sure, but I mean, I've met way more conservative lunatics than trans.
What are the chances that even on the smallest level of analysis, 100 people in the whole world that have this thing, what are the chances that one of them's a lunatic?
Just as high as any other.
It's 100%, I would say. Like you put any random 100 people in a room and you look at them and study them, chances are one of those people is out of their mind.
Sure.
So by defining a whole broad brushstroke of people, conservatives in this example, or we can go to faith being the next one, as completely on tilt, amoral, irredeemable, or just have lost their framework for reality. It also paints this assumption that the people that disagree with them don't share those characteristics. And then you have the whole side of the aisle over here that just got painted as like a amoral person who can point to this side of the aisle and go, well, wait a minute. What about these things that are represented on your side that aren't represented on our side? You're amoral. And then you just end up with this tit for tat thing and the whole world goes blind.
Right.
Meanwhile, you and I have known each other for a year, maybe. When I come in here, I hug you. I enjoy being around you.
No.
I like the conversations. We talk about real shit. Like when we're in the green room talking about how your week's going, we don't spend a whole lot of time on pleasantries.
Right.
So for all the things that we disagree on, there's enough that we agree on that when I come in here, it's not like let me give you a handshake and let's talk about pleasantry stuff.
Right.
Like we have real conversations.
Sure.
Getting past the things we disagree about, you can either choose to ignore those things or you can sit and talk about them and long for them and find your way through the areas that we agree on and we disagree on.
Yeah, I agree. And was I illustrating that I'm lumping people into these broad categories earlier?
When we disagree on something like politics or we disagree on something like faith, which I do want to talk about a little bit, there is a tendency to get hackles up, to get defensive, that both sides of any aisle are going to have.
Totally.
And it seems to me to be the default mode of most people to just avoid those things altogether.
It is easier for people, especially nowadays.
Especially the older generations. Yeah. I've shared this podcast with several older guys that I know that I would really like to get in here and talk to. And the moment they go watch
the
several more of those guys in the breakfast group.
Okay.
And a bit of feedback I constantly get is like, oh, you're talking about some personal stuff there. Like maybe I don't want to come in and talk about personal stuff. Yeah. Man, I don't like that. I don't like that as a default. I don't like that as like a knee-jerk reaction people have. Oh, we're going to talk about real stuff? Well, I don't want to talk about it then. I just don't think that's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, certain topics make people squirm. I was a little nervous about coming to do this because I wasn't sure what we were going to talk about. And I was, being on a camera and you don't want to appear, you don't want to misrepresent yourself.
Yeah.
And that was one of my issues. It's not that I have an issue with everything that I say. I'm always going to be inherently me. And I don't apologize for that. But I do like one of the kind of things that about me that I've really tried to facilitate is that so my freshman year of college, I took this speech class, and we were talking about nonverbal communication. And so just, the communication that you communicate to people by what you wear, by what you drive, by what what your bumper stickers say, by what your haircut looks like, just like every little detail about you that you communicate without speaking. And I thought to myself, I was like, well, what does my nonverbal communication tell people? And I was like, it's not that I'm worried about what I'm telling people necessarily. I just want to make sure that it's accurate. I want to make sure it's authentic. And so very much I am unapologetically me, and I try to maintain that. But so I was really mostly just worried about the way I would represent myself in front of a camera, and like, would I be authentic in the way that I want people to, like, I'm not worried about offending anyone. I'm worried about not being authentic. Does that make sense?
Totally. Yeah. So, well, it makes for the best conversations.
Yeah.
The moment you sense, like we were talking about in the green room, there's been these times where I go back and I watch these again, and you realize that somebody all of a sudden became hyper aware of that little red light on that device over there recording them. And it just takes them out of their being present and being genuine.
Right.
It's hard to get people to be genuine. I mean, in any context, but especially in front of a camera.
Right.
So, yeah, one of the reasons I thought it'd be fun to bring you in here and talk is that we talk about you a lot, right? Like I've called your name several times, and for the podcast that I consume, you don't really get to see the guy behind the scenes as often,
right?
Who is heavily involved,
right?
Some of those people I've gotten to know a little bit, and man, I'd like to hear a little bit more about the way they think.
Sure,
I think it's interesting.
Yeah.
All right, so I'll ask you the one question I've asked a bunch, but despite all of the news about current events, direction that things are going, all of the reasons to be negative about the future, where do you find sources of optimism? What makes you optimistic about the future that your 7-year-old daughter is going to inherit? You knew this question was coming.
I knew it was coming. And I'll be honest with you, I thought about it last night, and I still don't have an answer for you the way I want to. But to be real with you, not a lot. I might not be as I'm nervous. One of the classes I'm taking is a feminist history study on women in the Holocaust. And the longer I'm in this class, the more similarities I see with our current situation, and it scares the shit out of me. Which I know is an inflammatory statement to make, especially for people who, follow that route. But from a human angle, I'm scared. I'm nervous for my daughter's future. I'm nervous for the future she's going into. You know that the word female and woman has been banned from all grant study? Like anything you're trying, there's been a handful of phrases that are banned from you will get turned down for funding if that's in there. And women and female are in there, which is just
why?
Excellent question. Along with race, diversity, anything involving a very vast majority of subcultures. It scares me. And so I don't actually know, other than it seems to be anti-women and controlling of women's bodily autonomy, which also scares me for her. But the question was not what scares me. The question is what it makes me optimistic.
Yes, that is the question.
Our kids make me optimistic, because the world they're going to adopt is either going to be an atrocious mess that they're going to have to clean up, or they're going to view it as a challenge, which that could be great. Our kids see things in where things came from, and no, we don't want that again. and maybe they're going to, improve the situation of all of us. Or I remember one of you, what was it, Josh Binghamton said, he was talking about how, just nature, like the next day the sun will rise.
Yeah.
Kind of thing.
Sun comes up tomorrow.
Right. Regardless of what happened today, So I guess I just hope for the next generation, because that's one thing I will say is that these coming generations are some of the most empathetic, encouraging, interested, accepting generations I've ever experienced. And I see it in things I see on with my daughter's school, and things with things that were problems for her, or for me rather, when I was growing up, I never hear about from her. She never communicates some things. Obviously, bullies still exist and stuff like that. But I feel like every generation, specifically within the last 100 years, has been doing it better. And it's that's kind of the job of the next generation, is to do it better than the one before.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like that is one thing we're doing as a people pretty well, is that every generation, the next one's better and doing it just a little bit better. So that's I have optimism, and I think that they're going to do it better than we did.
Do you feel like it's important to convey optimism to your kids?
Sure. Because I don't mean it doesn't benefit her at all for me to be a Debbie Downer. It doesn't benefit her for me to be like, the world's going to hell in a handbasket, fucking light the whole place on fire. That doesn't help her. That doesn't help her.
And neither side of the political aisle has a monopoly on that archetype of person. They exist on both sides.
Right. Burn it all down.
Yeah.
No. I also come from a really antagonistic and just cynical background, and that's something also I've had to try and keep in check, is to not be so goddamn cynical around her, to assume the worst from everyone.
Yeah.
And that's me improving my parents' generation. So her improving my generation, and then her kids can improve her generation, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And so that makes me optimistic.
You kind of slay your parents' demons so that your kid doesn't have to
take
them
that.
on. Yeah.
I like that, like a dragon or something. And
we didn't get into the religious elements of this. We'll save that for the second conversation. Yeah.
Assuming nobody rage quits your podcast for me being on it.
Who's going to quit?
Fuck this.
Who's going to quit?
Unsubscribe.
All 11 people that follow it. No, Paul, I appreciate the attention to detail that you give to this operation that really means nothing to anybody but me, because taking pride in your work is not something that you find a whole lot. And again, that's not exclusive to any political party. There's deadbeats on both sides.
Absolutely.
But the level of attention to detail that you bring makes an impact on me for sure. You are professional in a way that not many people are. When I try to block time with you, when I'm in the studio and somebody's here and they're running long, you're moving things forward like a professional would, which I really, really appreciate. I appreciate your candor, that we didn't spend a whole lot of time on pleasantries getting to know each other early. I think we had one or two conversations in the green room, and then we got into real life talk.
Yeah. Yeah, we did. I think it was about family. Yeah.
I'm of the opinion that we share a hell of a lot more in common than we do differences.
I would probably agree with that.
And the things that we're different on, I kind of like being around people that I know are willing to disagree with me publicly in front of dozens of people. So, yeah, thanks for being open to doing this. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, it's just a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. Although nerves were definitely a part of it.
Yeah.
Just being on this side of the cameras.
It's weird, huh?
It's weird.
You survived it.
I survived.
You did an hour and 10 minutes, man.
Shit.
Goes by quick.
It does.
Yeah.
It does.
Thanks for doing it.
No problem, man.
Paul, we're done. It's a little weirder to do that when you're in the room.
I'm keeping that in the episode, by the way. That's
good.
staying in the episode.
Thanks a lot, man.
No problem.